This is Steve Martin. Walk with me as I turn around here at Appomattox Courthouse, and we're listening to a reenactment of a soldier.
I need to enlist. I need to do my duty. So I went to do recruiting officer. I stated my intentions, but as I said, you must be over 18 to enlist. And I just turned 17 in September. So it's not yet over 18. So I pulled a trick. Now, I did not tell a lie. Lying after all is a sin, and well, if my mother, if you're ever catch me telling a lie, well, I would fear my mother first in a bullet. So what I did was, now you young ones, you take notes on this, alright? What I did was I took a piece of paper, and I wrote number 18 on it, and I stuck the number 18 on the bottom of my boot right here. Terrifying, over 18, right? Not in the Army. It was punched air cold. I was put into the 199th Pennsylvania, led by a man named Captain Patrick Murphy, an Irishman. Now, please let me know right now, is there anyone who's Irish here by chance? Any Irish? Oh, you figure you're from Boston. Well, that's good to know. Well, quick, close the tavern! You have to watch those Irish. You don't know what they're going to pull. And we know what to think of first being led by an Irish captain, but we realize that he meant well by us, and even less through some thick spots of time too. As for my family, though, they weren't happy with my enlistment. And they told their neighbors that they have now lost both their sons to the war. And they shall never again say a single word to either one of us. Well, the Army, they sent me off to Philadelphia, and they loaded me onto a steamship and they sailed me down to Sea Point. And they put me in the Army of the James, under General Ord, and the 24th Corps, under General John Gibbon. And the Army of the James, my army, was right outside Richmond, the rebel capital. We were putting pressure on Richmond, while the Army of Shenandoah and the Army of the Potomac were down south, around Petersburg, putting pressure on Lee's army. This was the siege of Petersburg. Now you folks know about the fighting over Petersburg, don't you? If you were to go to Petersburg today, you will be greeted with miles of trench-work and fortifications. And that's what we're living with. We're living through the mud, the rain, the rats, the diseases, the blistering heat and the very cold. Every morning while I woke up, I woke to the sound of the artillery. And that sound followed me for the entire day, until I closed my eyes that night. And when I went to bed every night, I sent a prayer up to God to ask him to give me a ladder to climb out of hell. And I fought battles here and there, battles such as Fair Oaks, Hector's Run. But these battles all seemed to end the same way, all in a stalemate. Neither section seemed to gain any ground until the end of this past March. That's when I got a letter from my brother Joe. Now, as I said, Joe was serving in the cavalry, the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry to be exact, and Joe's letter read, Isaiah, a change is going to come. And that change comes, brother. You better be ready for it. That change came alright. It was a few days later after I got that letter, on April 1st, General Sheridan launched an attack on a place called Five Forks, Virginia, just south of Petersburg. That's where all of these supply lines came together at a single rail junction. And when Sheridan captured rail junction, that cut off all these supplies, and that forced his hand. We was forced to abandon Richmond and try to go down south into North Carolina, where General Johnson and General Sherman were still fighting. Lee's plan is to meet Johnson, destroy Sherman, and keep flying Grant. If this were to happen, everyone, I can guarantee you that we'd still fighting for today. So we took off after. Only there were some things that got in our way. First were a series of manned forts. Fort Sprague and Fort Whitworth. These forts were given orders by General Lee to remain behind and buy time for his army to escape Richmond. And the 24th Corps was told to take Fort Gregg. Now, when I speak to you of a military fort, don't think of these large stone forts such as Fort Sumter or Fort McHenry or Fort Monroe. Think of a pile of dirt. A pile of dirt that's manned by some 300 rebel soldiers. And the walls of this fort are slick with mud. And on the outside of this fort is a ravine, about 5 or 6 feet deep. And it's full of water and mud and debris and rocks and anything else you could throw into it. And this fort, it's sat in the middle of an open swamp. There's no cover anywhere. In my brigade, the 1st Brigade of my division, we were told to attack that fort dead on, to charge that swamp and go right for it. And that's what we did. We went right for it. As we charged that thick, muddy field, we were being rained down on by grape shot and musket ball. Men, my comrades all around me, were dropping all over the place. And I myself was struck by a bullet, right here in the chest. Now the reason why I'm still alive talking about this is because I was wearing my punch box. That punch box has a thick leather strap comes around my chest. And that bullet hits that leather strap, but it did not pierce the leather. It knocked me down, knocked the breath out of me. But all it really did was give me a big bruise on my chest. And I was able to get right back up, and I was joining my brigade in advance. And when we came to the walls of Fort Gregg, well, there's that ravine down there. The boys ahead of me were leaping over that ravine. They were hitting that water hard, and they were sliding down to the water below. And there was 100 boys on there with them. And they're all scrambling, getting to the top, grabbing a hold of each other and pushing each other back down to the mud, drowning each other in the mud. And they're still being shot by cannons and muskets, and the rebels came out, and they're taking bricks and rocks and wads of clay, and they're keeping it down below. And my time came to get over that ravine. I'll leap right over like a deer, and I hit the water hard, and I'm going to slide down to that muddy water. And I could feel the men down below me, grabbing hold of my uniform and pulling me down to the mud with them. But before I went under, a strong arm came out of nowhere and grabbed me by the collar of my coat and pulled me upright. And then I came face to face with my captain. And he looked at me and he said, "Get over that wall, son." And he grabbed hold of me and threw me over the wall. And I landed. And it was some of the most intense and bloody hot work I'd seen for that entire time of the war. Now, Fort Gregg, it didn't last for about a couple hours. Only a couple hours. But it felt like days. Days of nothing but charging and biting, kicking and screaming, stabbing, gouging, doing everything we could to stay alive. During the fighting, the captain, the man that saved my life that day, he couldn't save his own. He took a bayonet right to the gut. And during those few hours, we lost 800 big men. And as for those 300 rebel defenders, there's only about a handful of them left standing for hands in the air. And once Fort Gregg fell, Fort Whitworth was involved with it. And after the battle, we were tired. We were so very tired, but we couldn't stop. We had to keep using Lee. We had to chase him and catch him and end this war, to stop the killing. But one more thing stood in our way. Richmond. Richmond was on fire. During his retreat, General Lee had given orders to set fire to all those warehouses that were within Richmond City. The problem is those warehouses were built of very dry wood, and that wood burned like paper. And there was a breeze that day that carried its flames toward the entire city. And by the time we arrived, Richmond City was an inferno. And half of the army of James was told to go to Richmond and put those fires out. And as for the rest of us, we were told to keep moving west, to keep pursuing Lee, to chase him and catch him and end this war, and that is what we did. We took pursuit. And this begins the Appomattox campaign. This is where Lee's army was trying to go down south. But he's being blocked off by General Sheridan and the Army of Shenandoah. He's being pushed out west to the Blue Ridge Mountains by the Army of the Potomac and the Army of the James. And Lee will have to fight. Lee will fight at places like Jetersville, Burkeville, Amelia Springs, Sailor's Creek, Rice Station, Cumberland Church, and eventually Lee will come here to Appomattox. Now, why would he come here? There is nothing here, except for a few houses and barns put together. Well, 3 miles over the hill over there is Appomattox Station. And at that day on April 8th, there were some train cars at that train station. They're filled to the brim with food. Food that Lee's army needed to move on. For that past week, Lee's army was starving. They had no food. When Lee left Richmond, he was able to supply his men with fresh uniforms and munitions, but what they didn't have was food. And Napoleon had said an army marches on stomach. And those words are coming true for Lee. So we were finding many of Lee's men sitting the road that week, waiting to be taken prisoner. They were saying they'd rather be a prisoner in Grant's army than to start in Lee's army. When Lee left Richmond on April 2nd, he had 60,000 men or something. When Lee came here to Appomattox, he had about 28,000 with him on April 8th. So Lee came here to feed his boys. However, someone else heard about those train cars too. Someone that you've probably never heard of him though, George Custer. Well, Custer and his cavalry will come capture those train cars on April 8th. And that evening, Custer will order the cavalry to deploy all along the hillside. And they'll make campfires all over the field breakers. And they'll take all the fencing he has on the side of the road, they'll tear it up, they'll throw it right in the middle of the road to prevent more of Lee's army from advancing any further. And Lee now knows he's boxed in here. Lee's army of 20,000 is camped down at the bottom of the hill over there by the riverbanks. And to the south of here is the Army of Shenandoah, some 15,000 troops under General Sheridan. 3 miles east of here is the Army of the Potomac, some 30,000 troops under General Meade. On the south side is the cavalry, some 700 troops under General Custer. Now to the north of here, there's no one to the north. There's no army, no corps, no division, no one at all. But Lee's soaking in the north though. Can you hear guess why?
The river.
The river, yes, the river. For days it poured rain, blinding rain. I couldn't see but 10 feet in front of me. And I dare say if it rained any more than it did, we would have to chase Lee in an arc. The banks of the James River were flooded. There's no way to get across it. So Lee's here in the middle. He's got an army to the south, an army to the east, a river to the north, and some cavalry to the west. So you can guess that the way that Lee's trying to go here is west. So in the morning of April 9th, Lee will give orders to General John B. Gordon, commander of the 2nd Corps of his army, some 9,000 troops. And their job is to march right down this road, force off that cavalry, and move on to Lynchburg, some 20 miles away from here, and resupply there. And they will do just this. They will march right down this road. And when they got past that breaking fence over there, they performed what's called the right wheel, where they swept around like a door hinge, and they were able to wipe off that cavalry. But when they came to Harrison Hill though, when they were thinking they had a straight shot to Lynchburg, what happened since they came right smack in the Army of the James. All 12,000 of us. Now, how did we get there? Well, that night before on April 8th, the Army of the James was just reaching Farmville, some 30 miles east of here. And we were tired. We marched 80 miles up, 80 miles pouring rain and mud, 80 miles for continuous fighting. And we were hoping that we could stop for tonight. But we couldn't. We had to keep on moving. And there's officers who told us that legs will win this war, boys. Legs will catch Bob Lee. Well, it's easy for an officer to say, but he's on horse now, isn't it? So we keep on moving. Now let me tell you something about the Army, everyone. They see in the Army that if you're trying complaining, there's something wrong. Well, that night, no one complained. No one said a word. We did not know where we were marching to that night, but we knew what was going on. We knew that the end of the war was on the horizon, and all we had to do that night was much to it. All this came down to was, it was just a great foot race. Just out-march Lee's army, and we can catch him, we can end this war. And with us that night were some 5,000 United States colored troops, and they knew if they could beat Lee here, they would be so close to their freedom. So that night, we formed a 35-mile force march from Farmville to Appomattox Station, and by the break of dawn that morning, we made it to the train station, and we formed lines of battle. And we waited. And we waited. And we waited until around 8 o'clock. That's when we appeared at the contrast station over the hillside. That was the cavalry engaging Second Corps. Not for long, so the cavalry were past us. And right on their heels was the rebel army. And those graybacks, when they stepped out of the fog that morning, we were all lined up, waiting to say good morning to him. Now, the fighting here at Appomattox is not compared to that battle such as Gettysburg or Antietam. The fighting here lasted for about an hour. Only an hour. But during that hour, there will be some 700 casualties. 700 men killed, captured, or wounded in an hour. The fighting here is very desperate. During the fighting, the 5th Corps, they drew up the Army of the James, and together we advanced to the very top of the hill up there. We captured some rebel artillery on top of the hill, and we can see right down in this village. And that's when the gun smoke cleared, and we could see white flags waving over the river lines. Now, to be clear, everyone, white flag does not mean surrender. It means ceasefire. So we held our fire, and we waited some more. Now, the waiting this time was worse than fighting itself, because we knew we were right there on the finish line. We were right there on top of it. But we also knew that at any given moment, that gunfire would start back up again. The dying would start back up again. Imagine being so close to the end. So close to the end of the war, but you may not live to see it. Because it always, when there's a war being fought, there's always someone who's less dying. We knew that we had two options here. Either keep fighting a battle he cannot win, or surrender and hope for the best. And we were scared to death that he was going to choose the first option. That was going through our minds during all this time. We were all thinking the same thing. But no one dared to say a word about it. Everything was silent. Everything was still. It's as if God that day was holding his breath, waiting to see what's going to happen. Well, the silence was soon broken by the rumble of thunder at the horizon. And that thunder got closer and closer to us until it was revealed to be all these men on horseback, riding right towards us. And at their lead was General Grant himself. And when Grant rode past us, can you believe what he did? Grant took off his hat. He took off his hat. And that was Grant doing many things at once. That was Grant telling us that he has been there with us since the very beginning. Grant has been there since Petersburg, all the way between. He was there through the mud, blood, and the rain, and he understands. He knows how we're doing right now. But he's asking for a favor. If we could just hold on. If we could just wait a little bit longer. And he can bring us the end. He can promise the end. But what he needs from us in return, though, is our patience. So we gave him our patience. And we watched as Grant and his staff, they rode right down the hill. And they came to that big brick house over there. And they went inside the house and closed no concrete. Once again, everything was silent. Everything was still. Now we knew what was going on in the house. We knew what was happening. But no one dared say a word about it. And folks, I'm only a private. We're not invited to this occasion, so I can't give you the details of that meeting. But what I will say is around 3 o'clock that afternoon, Grant and his staff exited the house. And with them were 2 rebel officers. And one wore a fine gray uniform with white trim beard. And I remember somewhere nearby, a band began to play Old Lang Syne. It was finally over. It was finished. We broke down right on the spot. We cheered, we cried tears of joy, we hugged one another, and we thanked God above for allowing us to live to see this moment. Soon, after the celebration started though, General Grant will give the orders for all to be ceased immediately. Grant will say that these men are our countrymen again, and they are not to be humiliated. And that frustrated us. That angered us. Because we had fought long and hard for this. We have bled and died for this. I have watched many of my comrades' arms for this past year be cut down battlefields for this. The war was over, was it not? After everything that we've been through, haven't I earned the right to celebrate? Well, those orders, they were not coming from General Grant. Can you make a guess where they're coming from?
President
Lincoln, yes. Lincoln. Now, Lincoln was never here. He never stood here among us. He never walked these hills. But his presence we felt. But he felt in the air. Let them up easy. That's what he said. Let them up easy. Make no things harder for them than these be. Make it clear to them that the fighting is done. But let them up easy. Now, I'm sure my friends from South Carolina didn't vote for Lincoln. How are my friends from Massachusetts? Did you vote for him?
Yeah.
How are my friends from Pennsylvania? Did you vote for Lincoln?
Probably.
Okay, well, my family didn't. My pa did not support Lincoln. My pa said that man Lincoln is going to be able to drive this country to hell, and the 2 of you boys will be wise to stay away from him. And that is the way we thought of Mr. Abraham Lincoln. That's the way I thought of him. Until a few years ago, after the battle over at Gettysburg. When he went there, did you know that he went to Gettysburg and he gave a speech amongst the dead and the buried? And when I read his words in paper, I realized what that man stood for. And I realized that we were wrong about him. We were wrong and he was right. For all these years, we mocked him, we scoffed him, we humiliated him. he was right. And he was not sent to us from hell. So on the contrary, don't you think it's very curious how the good Lord can provide just the right man at the very right moment? Just as Washington was given to us during the Revolution, told to carry the Continental Army, here was Lincoln doing the very same thing. Because no one in this country could have done what that man had done. No one could have held us together for all these years the way Lincoln had done, and that is because Lincoln had a plan. He had a plan. A plan that was going to heal us and make us stronger and lead us forward. And all we had to do that day on April 9th was follow Mr. Lincoln's plan. And that's what we did. So the guns fell silent, the crowd fell silent, and the celebration fell silent. And once again, everything will be silent. Everything will be still. Now Grant's terms to lead, they stated that these men, these soldiers, are not be harmed, and that no one is taken prisoner. No one, including Lee himself, is taken prisoner. They're all allowed to go back home. And any officer sidearms, such as swords and pistols, these may be kept. And any horse that is claimed may be kept as well. Now think of these terms. And think of civil wars and revolutions happened before this. Someone's humiliated. Someone's taken prisoner. And someone down the line is executed. You know, the other day I was reading in Harper's Weekly, and it's talking about how over in China, just last year, their own civil war, the Taiping Rebellion, and they're seeing over there that the people, that the deaths over there are in the millions, and to this day, they're still rounding people up and taking people to prison, and killing folks in the masses. That didn't happen here, and that's not what's going to happen. With malice towards none. That's what Lincoln said. And in that same spirit, next day, on April 10th, General Grant will give you orders for a printing press set up in the tavern over there. And it's this printing press currently using called parole passes. Now, what these parole passes were, they were General Grant's word that these men are not to be harmed. They are pardoned. There's still a war being fought. And if these men go through areas where there's still fighting going on, they can and will be seen as either the enemy or deserters. And either way, that's going to get them shot and killed. So this parole pass is proof that they've surrendered honorably. And they may use this pass at any federal camp they came across to get free food and rations. Also, it will act as a free ticket to ride on any federal-controlled road or railway. And I am told they print out some 30,000 parole passes in a tavern over there in just a day and a half. On the same day, April 10th, Lee's cavalry was ran from the general store over there. And on April 11th, the next day, Lee's cannons were over by the riverbanks. And on April 12th, almost 4 years after fighting Fort Sumter, General Gordon will lead the 1st Louisiana Infantry right down this road to sack their arms. When Gordon and the infantry, when they came to top hill over there, they were greeted by General Joshua Chamberlain. Yes, that Chamberlain. Chamberlain and his brigade that morning had been lying beside this road, waiting to receive sacking the arms. And when Chamberlain and Gordon, when they saw each other, Chamberlain ordered his men to stand at attention and shoulder arms. This was seen as a sign of respect, a salute. And when Gordon, when he saw the salute,